You're listening to Kaye on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Kaye Adams. I was driving back from the supermarket the other night and I saw something that nearly made me drive up off the road, a sign advertising driving lessons for 12-year-olds. But apparently I'm behind the curve here. The AA now recommend introducing youngsters to driving much earlier in their teens.
Left hand back up to the wheel, bring that clutch up just a wee tad at a time, the pound coin would. Feel it moving?
Yeah.
Now the clutch has done its work, slowly clutch up. One,
Okay.
two, three, and just sliding that clutch to the side. There you go.
Right, where
Soft.
am I going?
Oh, steer it to the right.
Okay.
Looking to the right, feeding it around.
I have been working on my steering because normally I cross my hands.
Do you cross your hands?
Yeah.
Why do we not want you to cross the hands when you're steering?
Because then I don't have control.
You don't have control, that's right. So we'll do a wee bit of work in that as the session goes on.
Because you'll crash! He's obviously he's a very good instructor, Billy Mitchell. I wouldn't make a very good instructor. That was Eliza Stewart there taking her third lesson at Hamilton Racecourse at the weekend, not on public roads, you'll be glad to know. But Billy gives lessons to youngsters from 12 up. And I'll be speaking to Andrew Howard, the head of road safety at the AA, to find out why he thinks that's a good idea. A wee diversion though, which is a pretty rough pun when you hear what I'm going to go on and say. Did you know that nearly a quarter of 18 to 24-year-olds crash within 6 months of passing their tests? Now, some people think that the driving age should be raised in response to that, but there's a new school of thought that thinks that actually youngsters should start learning to drive earlier. This is 16-year-old Eliza Stewart taking her third lesson.
Good, let's get that tad slot. Right foot well off gas.
Will the car still move if I go with it?
Well, it'll just tick over with the engine tick over speed. And how did that feel?
Better than the first time.
Better.
Ooh.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Good. And straight up the hill again. Now let's take it back into another compound round to the
Okay.
left and then the right. Could there be any danger coming down that right side?
Yeah.
Good observation.
Well, that did take place on private ground, and but these lessons now available across Scotland to kids as young as 12. And Andrew Howard, the head of road safety at the AA, thinks it's a good idea. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Good morning. What is the thinking about this? I must admit, it surprises me, and I said at the beginning, and it was true. I passed a sign at the side of the road advertising driving lessons for 12-year-olds, and I thought, what the heck is this all about?
Well, a lot of it is a long-running campaign to start trying to get children to have the right attitude towards driving in their early teens, rather than ending up with the attitude they do when they're 17, 18, which is, I passed my test, I've got something here now that I'm good at, I can show off to my friends. And the huge number of accidents amongst new drivers, which are caused by just the sheer urge to show off their newfound skill. If we can teach them younger, get them the responsible attitude younger, we may well avoid all the problems we get from the wrong attitude when they're older.
So you don't think it would just only encourage them and make them more kind of anxious to be out in the road with this long build-up?
Well, what you've got to do is make sure that you get the right blend of practical driving and the theory side of driving, the psychological side of driving. And most of these schemes aim to do that. It's not about just giving them the driving skills. It's about giving them all the various mental skills that they need to enter into what's one of the biggest responsibilities you get in life, in the most sound way when you eventually get there.
I mean, I must admit, maybe this is just the meanie in me, but I thought, is this just a way of getting money out of parents, more money out of parents? You know, your 14-year-old wants to learn to drive.
I don't think it is. I keep going back to the attitude things because things which I always remember from research is the fact that if you've got a mum and dad who are not the best drivers, particularly if they're aggressive drivers, show-off drivers, fast drivers, that invariably rubs into the children. So children of people with penalty points tend to end up getting penalty points. That's one rule. That's something that we can try to counter. And you also see when you start talking, children as young as 13, 14, start saying, are you going to be a good driver? Are you going to impress people with your driving? They're all saying yes. And again, that's one of those feelings that you want to drive out of them if you possibly can.
And has this been tested elsewhere? You know, are there any other examples across the world where it's proven to be beneficial to be having kids exploring driving at the age of 13 and 14?
Everything is so totally differently done in so many places. There have been some very well controlled schemes here, particularly ones by people like the Under 17 Car Club, that have a good tradition of working properly and producing safe young drivers. What we need to do now is expand it into more groups of people, and therefore we'll be able to find out whether it works for the whole population.
Okay, well, Andrew, thank you very much indeed. That's Andrew Howard, the head of road safety at the AA, who thinks it's a good idea to be introducing youngsters to driving much earlier on in their teens, possibly as early as 12, to be taking lessons on private grounds. He's coming from a position of expertise. There are a lot of accidents caused by young drivers. Within 6 months of passing their test, 23%, I think, have a crash. So would this be the way of trying to develop a more responsible attitude in young drivers? You can let me know your thoughts, 80295. Talking of what's happening on the roads, and Marie Watson's got the travel.
Thanks, Kaye. I think it's a great idea for youngsters to get driving lessons, by the way, especially at school. There's so many jobs out there they could do if they could drive, and just imagine what that might mean for the jobs market.
Yeah, Harry's on the line. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Kaye.
Good morning. You were responding to our friend at the AA saying that we should teach kids to drive earlier.
Yes, indeed.
Think it's a good idea?
I was up at Kames Motor Complex a week past yesterday, and they ran a round of the Scottish Formula 1000 Junior Championship, which are for drivers of restricted cars, but for drivers of age 14 to age 17.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the driving skills that we saw were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, it can't do anything but good to get youngsters driving earlier.
Well, I mean, I suppose, as Andrew was saying, just takes out that element of, that's it, we're 17, we've got to go. You know, if you introduce them earlier, then you don't have that kind of moment of, explosion, if you like.
That's right. Well, some of these kids, the boys and girls, it wasn't just boys. There was a 16-year-old girl up from Lancashire who hadn't driven last year and was going like the clappers and handling beautifully. But what I was going to say was the skill that they have is honestly way far more than mine. I mean, I would feel inferior competing against them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't speak to Andrew about it, but I mean, I think part of the thinking behind this is at a certain age, say 13, 14, your ability to soak in new skills and to react very quickly to changing situations is kind of at its peak. So, Harry, we're both past it, frankly.
That's it, yes. Well, I am. There's no doubt about that. But the other thing is there's a lot of the motor clubs are running auto tests for juniors as well now, which is off-road, and it's very, very, very good at training. Distances and spaces, and absolutely clever stuff, and more power to their elbows.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Harry, nice to speak to you this morning. Sounds as if you had a good weekend. Got a text in this. What's somebody going to say? Jim. What's Jim saying? More kids will die on the roads as young drivers and passengers will then die from misuse of drugs, alcohol or underage sex. Yet we don't include safe driving education in schools. We don't say to kids, don't have sex. We teach them about condoms. Why do we insist on saying to youngsters, don't drive badly, rather than teaching them how to be a safe driver while still at school? I think Jim is basically in favour of youngsters learning to drive a little bit earlier.